So the title is Value Management to Meet Client Goals and Objectives from Day One of Design. That last 4 words are the most important in the title. Just to show you that I've been around the block a few times, this slide just goes through some of what Azadine said. I'm actually up to about 435 VE studies, but basically I've been around for 38 years doing value engineering, so I've seen a lot of things, and I'm going to hopefully give you something new to think about today. I have a few slides that are really just to make sure we're all on the same page. And when we talk about value management, we're talking about functional requirements and essential functions. And the real reason for this slide is to show you that whether you call it value analysis, engineering, or management, it's basically a shield for extra costs, but it doesn't just shield the designer or the value engineer, it shields the user, the shareholders, and the owners from extra costs. So as Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. The main part of this slide I want you to look at is the formula. It says value equals total project or facility performance over life cycle cost. The key to that is in value management, we have to make sure we take care of the project performance. So why do we use VM? There's a lot of different reasons as shown on this slide. I was getting an echo.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Not clearly.
All right, good, thank you. So here's a list of all the reasons we use value management. The ones I want to talk about are get essential functions at the minimum lifecycle cost. That's pretty much our goal in almost every case. But also, among other things, we want to use it to make complex decisions or solve difficult design problems, and for concept development and consensus building. I will touch on more on those things than these other reasons that we all use value management. Let's go next. This is just a simpler way of looking at it. We want to reduce capital costs, life cycle costs, but we also can reduce design time, we can reduce decision time, and we can reduce schedule and risk. And on a positive side, we can improve quality, improve value, improve sustainability, improve the number of ideas, increase consensus, and increase the performance of the project. So these are all goals that we are searching for when we're doing value management. So basically, projects need to start right in order to finish right. And we'll talk about this quite a bit more later. But basically, the value management program is a way of juggling the scope, the expectations, and the budget so that you can meet all three in the execution of your project. And there's many ways we can balance money, quality, and time to improve value. Again, the simpler version is functional benefits over cost. We can improve the benefits and maintain the cost, or we could maintain the benefits and reduce the cost. We can also sometimes improve the benefits and reduce costs. And sometimes we even reduce the benefits and therefore reduce costs if the benefits remain within the needs of the project and the cost stays within the limitations. And on the other hand, we can also increase benefits and increase the cost if that benefit is worth the extra cost. So these are all things that we look at when we're doing value management. Important to our discussion tonight is when do you do value management? And if you look at this simple chart, basically most of us do it in the design phase about the end of preliminary design. That's where, in general, most value management occurs. But if you look at this slide, what this slide is telling you is the earlier you do it in the project's life, the more potential benefit you can offer. And what I want to talk about tonight is doing it more at the beginning of the project, where you can have the most impact on the project, not just in savings, but in all the other reductions that we talked about, including design time. Another similar curve, they call this the willingness to change curve. And if you notice, if I go back to the slide before, it's the same shape as this. pretty much the earlier you do it, the more the savings is and the more willingness there is to change. And the other thing is the blue line here shows you the later it is in design, the more costly it is in order to make the change. If you can find that change early, it's not very costly to make the change. And this slide is here just to remind everybody that value management is a very interdisciplinary tool. And this is for a typical building, you would have the architect, civil, structural, mechanical, electrical, owner's requirements, and probably have others. But part of what I'm going to talk about today, let's just take buildings as an example, and I don't mean to pick on architects, but when projects start, a lot of times the architect has a vision of what he wants on the project, and they hold a kickoff meeting, and he gives all the other disciplines their job number, and he gives them their number of hours, but he says basically to them, I'll come up with the architecture, and then in a few months I'll talk to you, and then you guys can fit around me what is going on. And what I'm going to try to show tonight is that's not necessarily the best way to get your project going quickly and efficiently. Again, we all have this common knowledge that we have pre-workshop effort, and we have the workshop, and then we have some post-workshop efforts. And no matter when you do your value management, this is the standard approach that we all take. And in general, overall efforts are managed by a certified value specialist. We have intensive pre-workshop prep and meetings, and then we have our organized focus group workshop of 2 to 5 days. You know, we all like 5 days, but a lot of clients are pushing more and more for shorter workshops. But in general, they're all facilitated by a CVS with multiple discipline experts. We talk about cost, schedule, and constructability experts sometimes, depending on when the project is. And if we're lucky, we have the owner and the user involved so they can keep us straight on what the project's all about. And then at the end, there's a formal report containing recommendations. And if we're lucky, we get involved in a follow-up and implementation phase where things actually get accepted and done. So it comes down to this value management job plan, which is very familiar to all of us who have done value engineering. And to those of you who are kind of new to it, it's kind of a good refresher. Well, we start with the information phase in the workshop. We go to the function analysis phase, which is shown here as the cornerstone of value management. And after we've analyzed the function, we do a creative phase where we brainstorm the best ways to meet those functions. Then we pick from those ideas the ones that we think are worth developing. We develop the ideas further, and then we present the results, hopefully to the client. And then after the workshop, if we're lucky, there's an implementation phase where all of these things get put into design, and a follow-up phase just to make sure it happens. All of this is designed to get your essential functions at the lowest cost. So I'm going to go through each of those phases, and I'm not going to go through everything, but I want to talk about the parts that I'm going to address here in later slides. So in the information phase, we have gathered factual information by answering a bunch of questions. But what I'm trying to show here is the ones that are in bold are questions that are relevant even at the very start of the project. What is the scope? What is the project? What is the project scope? What are the design criteria and requirements of that project? What are the reasons for the project? What are the owner's objectives? Who are the stakeholders in this project, and what are their objectives? And that's a lot of questions that the designer really should know those answers before he starts designing a project. So then the next phase, after you know all that information, you go to the function analysis phase where you're going to define the project functions, then review and analyze them to determine which need improvement, elimination, or creation to meet the project goals. Well, at the very start of the project, you really don't have a defined design yet. So you're analyzing the project functions to determine how best to meet those functions, as well as how those functions should relate to each other. And in this phase, at the beginning of a project, all the design disciplines should be involved in those discussions, not just the primary designer. For example, in a wastewater plant, the process designer doesn't get to make all the decisions. These other disciplines should be in the discussion as well. So then we go to the creative phase, and we all know how to brainstorm. We've all been doing brainstorming, spontaneous production of ideas to perform the required function. But the difference at the very start of the project, you're brainstorming how best to meet the functions instead of brainstorming how someone else has addressed it and then determining a different way to do it. You're actually determining how to meet those functions from the very beginning. And again, all the design disciplines should be involved in that brainstorming session so that all of the aspects that affect them are also addressed in the discussion. And then we go to the evaluation phase to apply a structured evaluation process to select ideas that we should develop. At the very start of the project, we are evaluating those brainstormed ideas on how best to meet the functions you have identified as required to meet the needs of the project. And the goal is to select which ideas to develop further. And you can select more than one idea for the same function. And then as you develop them, you'll find out which of the two really is the better way to go. And then the development phase, and this is where you put the meat on the bones of the idea, so you understand what the benefit of that idea might be. At the very start of the project, you are actually developing alternatives to meet the required functions. The alternatives that rise to the top will pave the way from day one to a successful project. And when that decision is made, all the disciplines were involved in that process. So all should be on board that this is the way we should approach this project. And if they don't speak up, it's their own fault, basically. And then a presentation in a typical workshop, we have a presentation where we convey the proposals developed by the VE team in an oral presentation to the designer and the owner so they can make decisions on implementing those. But at the very start of the project, the presentation would be more of a collaborative decision session where we would all agree on alternatives to become the basis of the design. And hopefully the client and stakeholders will be part of that discussion. However, if the client and stakeholders are not part of that discussion, then an oral presentation would still be required to bring them on board. So what we're trying to say is we can deliver real value management, and I want to just touch on that for everyone's sake here and understand what we're doing here. Again, overall project performance over total life cycle cost. And we can talk about value management, analysis, or engineering, and they're all basically the value methodology. And we all have slightly different definitions, but in general, it's the same. So what is value management? It is something that optimizes resources while maintaining or improving quality and performance. It improves function, performance, schedule, constructability, and sustainability, depending on what phase of the project you're in. It reduces risk, solves difficult problems, and builds consensus. It improves value. It's tailored to meet client expectations. It's best done early to build consensus on the right project. It's well defined by SAVE International, ASTM E1699-20, and the European Value Standard BSI EN 12973-20. And it's a discipline in which many of us on this call are highly skilled and experienced in. But one of the key points is value management is not a cost-cutting session near the project completion, which people incorrectly call value engineering. And even in my own firm, this is something that really bugs me because we have people doing this cost-cutting type of stuff, calling it value engineering, which makes it very hard for me to sell value engineering to that client on the next project. Let's continue. This is a joke. The Queen says to the King, "Let me guess, you told the contractor to save money without sacrificing any luxury items, right? And you end up with a 6-inch wide drawbridge." So this is what I'm talking about. We're not after cost-cutting sessions. That was mostly because I like the joke. So let me talk a little about the models for value engineering. I want to compare the North American, and I call it the SAVE model, versus European model value management. Both models follow the same basic tenets of the value methodology that we talked about above. The SAVE model value management is most commonly a single workshop at the end of preliminary design. That's where we usually get our shot, which asks the question, are we doing the right project? If held at a conceptual design level, which is less common but very beneficial, we often call that value planning. If held during design development, for example, the 50 to 65% design, the question really becomes, are we doing the project right? So you pretty much have already defined what the project is. Now you're just making sure you're doing it correctly. Rarely a project will get 2 VM studies, normally at 30% and again at 65. Most value management studies are a requirement of a federal, provincial, state, city, local agency, or another organization, and it's usually tied to the source of funding. It's not in every case. So some entities like New York City, Fairfax County, Virginia, the city of Calgary, and the Ministry of Transportation in Ontario do value management just to ensure good value for the money they spend. In many of those cases, they're not forced to do it. They themselves do it. And finally, a certified value specialist is usually required to facilitate the value management study. Hang on, I lost my mouse. There we go. Now let's talk about again, this time I'm calling it the American model versus the European model. I think I left the word north out. The European model VM shares the following characteristics. The VM team is, in general, the project delivery team. In other words, it's the design team. At the very beginning of the project, before they've already decided what they're going to do, they are the VM team to decide what to do. And with the owner, client, and all disciplines of the design team, plus the users and stakeholders as appropriate. And the point of it is to foster consensus on the design. A multi-day session at the project start provides a consensus project definition, giving all parties a quality start on the same path. And if everyone starts on the same path, you're going to minimize quality issues and redesign down the road. The best example I can come up with is many times an architect will design a building and he'll have a certain height above the ceiling. And a month after he's made his decisions, he goes to the structural engineer and a mechanical engineer and finds out that there's not enough room in the ceiling to fit the ductwork or fit the structural system that's required for that building. If all those guys were on the same page from day one, they would be preparing as they went to fit all those things in. So the project delivery team are all up to speed from day one, ready to deliver the project cost effectively. Also in the European model, they have 2 to 4 hour value control workshops that are held monthly or quarterly to ensure the project stays on the right path, dealing with issues, risks, adjustments, and innovation that happens along the way by consensus of the group. And more than for just single projects, this approach is often used to roll out major programs for agencies, corporations, and other organizations. The European model VM is guided by the European value standard I mentioned earlier. And professional in value management, PVM, is usually required to facilitate their VE studies. So there's a difference there. So what I want to call for is a new value management paradigm in North America. And that is, I want to use VM to meet client goals and objectives from day one of design. So for design firms, that client is whatever agency or organization hired you for the design. For an agency or organization, the clients are the stakeholders that are depending on your project or product, whether they're customers, taxpayers, the traveling public, or whatever. Agencies or organizations, you have the power to require your design teams, whether in-house or hired, to implement a value management program from day one. Design firms, you have the power to use value management from day one to deeply understand the goals and objectives of your clients and deliver the performance that they need. With all the disciplines and stakeholders being part of consensus decisions on how to proceed, design will be accelerated with fewer quality issues and less need for redesign. and the cost that goes with it. So value management will help you chart your course from day one, instead of being seen as a potentially disruptive intervention at 35% of design or even later. In most cases, those of us in North America, we are seen by the design team as someone who's intervening into their project, and we're not always welcome in that role. So I'm trying to move that benefit to the beginning of the project where everybody's on board and everyone is working together for the good of the project. So we want to use value management as a tool to initiate projects with consensus of client and design team on the project goals, objectives, and performance requirements. So in that model, VM would begin as a project planning or conceptual design workshop with the following. The VM team would consist of the project delivery team with owner, client, and all disciplines of the design team, plus users and stakeholders as appropriate. A multi-day workshop building a consensus of all parties on the project goals, objectives, and performance requirements, minimizing quality and redesign issues. All project delivery team disciplines are on the same page by completion of the VM workshop. The VM workshop would be led by a CVS or other experienced facilitator. It could be somebody in-house who is familiar with the job plan. 2 to 4 hour value check workshops would be held monthly or quarterly to ensure the project alignment. And finally, we'd be going after value as the overall project performance over the total lifecycle cost. And if the above looks familiar to you, as our previous slide, it's not an accident. That's exactly what we're saying. So how will the new value management paradigm differentiate organizations? Well, they will be seen as caring enough about their clients to provide them with a collaborative opportunity to express their wants and needs. Their voice will be heard. Organizations will be seen as using an innovative approach to accelerate design so that client goals and objectives can be realized sooner. Organizations will be seen as seeking to optimize value for their clients, considering not only economy, but also sustainability, resiliency, performance, and other client concerns. And organizations will be seen as doing it right the first time, resulting in few, if any, quality or performance issues leading to rework and related schedule implications. In a front-end VM workshop followed by a value check workshops is something no one else in North America provides, to my knowledge. I could be wrong, but if it's true, it's very rare. So what will organizations gain from implementing Day 1 VM? Well, they're going to be able to accelerate design by developing options in the VM workshop, which you could call value optioneering, collaborating with clients and obtaining client consensus on selected options, defining project goals, objectives, and performance requirements on day one, and focusing the design team and aligning all disciplines on the same path. And organizations will be able to increase profitability by delivering services consistently and avoiding quality issues and resulting rework. By differentiating themselves, resulting in deeper strategic client relationships, repeat business with existing clients, and attraction of new clients. And finally, accelerating design and project delivery, making design personnel available for other design opportunities. So what will clients gain from Day 1 VM? Well, the clients will have an excellent opportunity to let their needs and wants be heard in a meaningful, collaborative way. Their clients will enjoy accelerated design and potential early delivery of their constructed facilities. Clients will receive best value for the money spent with projects that meet their goals, objectives, and performance requirements. And clients will feel like valued members of the project delivery team who are part of the consensus decision-making, resulting in collaborative relationships. So how does Day 1 VM pay for itself? With the project delivery team serving as the VM team, the hours they would normally spend getting familiar with a new design project can now be focused in an organized VM session for the greater benefit of the project and organization. The project kickoff goes from an hour of giving out job numbers and hours to a day or two of project definition, including goals, objectives, functional and performance requirements, and value optioneering. The output is a consensus-based design concept to deliver that defined project, giving each discipline a clear understanding of their approach and how it must fit into the overall project. Adjustments needed along the way are communicated in the monthly or quarterly 2 to 4 hour value check workshops to keep all disciplines on track. And finally, endless hours of discipline coordination meetings redesigned to fit other disciplines and quality fixes due to missed requirements can be avoided. So here's a couple examples of what day one value management can avoid. A conceptual design study was done on a massive roadway project, which had 5 alternatives. The preferred concept involved depressing the highway below grade, and a combined value and risk management workshop was held to verify the best performing alternative. The major workshop conclusion was that depressed roadway was located in the worst stratum available. It is highly likely that a day one VM session, including geotechnical expertise, would have avoided the resulting need for redesign. On another high-profile interchange project, a VM study was held at the end of preliminary design and concluded that while the ramps and main line would perform very well, the left turns required to access the on-ramp would tie up local roads from the day it opened. The VE team recommended a much better performing interchange for a modest additional cost. Unfortunately, the related decisions to implement that eventual solution delayed the project almost 5 years. A day one VM with all necessary disciplines would most likely have identified and avoided that issue. So now I'm going to give you a few examples, and none of these examples are exactly what I'm talking about, but they share attributes to what doing it at the very beginning would do. We did a 5-day long-range planning for the water department for the city of Calgary. It was a 5-day risk-based VA study to guide the city on sequencing and strategy for increasing their water treatment plant capacity and transmission infrastructure, both long-term and short-term, to meet future levels of service. A large multidisciplinary team of consultants and city personnel gave recommendations in 3 groups. 1, we recommended a 10-year action plan, including North Calgary transmission to North Hill project, Bears Paw and Glenmore water treatment plant firming programs with ultraviolet disinfection and replacement of 2 900 millimeter 1,000 meter what is it now? 900. What's that? What does mm mean, guys? I think it's millimeter. That's right. It's the diameter. 2 900 millimeter diameter transmission conduits with 1 1,350 millimeter conduit. We did proactive long-range planning, including low-flow supply resiliency, water treatment plant in South Calgary, monitoring system demand and risks, and customer and regulatory agency dialogue on service level and utility rates. Finally, we had a 2028 short-term action plan, decisions on the next water treatment plant and water source, how to increase low-flow reliability of the Elbow River, transmission system extension reinforcement projects, and capital improvement actions to further reduce risks from natural disasters or climate change. So this study was not about saving money. It was not about looking at an existing design and modifying it. It was about what should we do to go forward with the City of Calgary water plan. So that's one example. Another was the Garden City Skyway from Niagara Street to Glendale in St. Catharines, Ontario. This was done at the end of the planning stage, and the project estimate we showed a accepted cost avoidance of $44 million, or a return on investment of 296 to 1. But what I really wanted to talk about is the other benefits. We deferred replacement beyond 2020 to use the remaining service life of this heritage bridge. We had a minor rehab holding strategy which maximized deferral until the assumed building of the new twin structures in 2040. And we had additional structural possibilities for the new bridges because there would be no requirement to match the existing Skyway as there was given the designers of the conceptual plan. So all of these things had major implications on the way the project would move forward, kind of like it would at the beginning of a project. Then we had a value scoping study for the Lac La Biche education solution in Lac La Biche, Alberta. And the goal was to provide an educationally viable, cost-effective, long-term solution to school facility needs for this community. We wanted to create a tangible educational model for the community to move forward while obtaining potential economies of scale and other benefits offered by various options. We wanted to find a solution that made the region better tomorrow than it is today in both self-perception and reality. The 11-person value scoping team developed 5 options in addition to the base case multiplex plan. An evaluation matrix with 8 weighted performance criteria showed a modified base case performed slightly better with an estimated 4.4 million capital cost avoidance. More work remained, but a viable path forward was well defined by the value management study very early on before they decided exactly what they were going to do. I think there's 2 more examples. Organic solid waste facility location value study for the City of Calgary Waste and Recycling Services. We considered the 3 existing city landfills and additional locations generated in the workshop. We analyzed the above locations using performance criteria and measures, plus annualized cost estimates of capital O&M collection and transportation costs over 20 years. We prepared an evaluation matrix to demonstrate the comparison using the formula on the left. That small formula, you recognize that formula, I think. We showed rigor in the decision-making process to get recommended location approved. So that was one of the goals of the workshop, was that whatever analysis we did, it had to be rigorous enough that the city council would go with it. Of the 6 locations, the 2 Shepherd landfill sites clearly had the highest performance scores and second lowest annualized life cycle costs, yielding the best value ratios by over 38%. The city chose the best Shepherd site based on the results of our study and other intangible factors. And the last example, this is something we did the 2nd Avenue subway in New York City. It was just the fit out of the subway stations. It was a $700 million project. We came up with accepted cost avoidance of $89 million, or a 213 to 1 return on investment. So it was obviously worth doing, but it was very early on in the project. And the other benefits included elevators in lieu of escalators, offered added ADA, American Disabilities Act, and stretcher compliance and less standard equipment lead time. We reduced the size of 6 ancillary buildings, avoiding significant capital and life cycle costs, and air systems to keep air moving at the platform level versus tempering the air, lowered O&M costs by eliminating chillers, pumps, and air handling units. The client was somewhat trepidatious to hold a VE study, but was extremely happy that he did it as early as they did. And I believe I'm up to questions.